Hello and welcome to another tutorial video and writing exercise for applying scene breaks. Scene breaks are breaks that separate paragraphs, often within the same chapter, in order to transition from one scene, location, time, or plot to another in a narrative. These allow readers to know where one scene ends and where another begins. Below I have a couple key points when it comes to applying scene breaks. The first is scene breaks help with story pacing to speed up or slow down the momentum of a plot depending on what type of a scene is. For example, motor accident or fight scenes tend to be quicker or shorter than some contemplative scenes or scenes where a character is just thinking about something. The next key point is to transition smoothly from one scene to another. Scene breaks help with that, and especially for multi-whole plots in a story. Scene breaks allow writers to move back and forth between, for example, a main plot and a subplot interchangeably, which can hold your reader's interest. Going back and forth to the main plot about what's going on in the main plot and then switching back over to the subplot or another scene of a main plot, for example. Another key point for scene breaks is they help with improving the flow of reading so readers aren't confused, and they can allow the story allow them to be able to follow the story better without being overwhelmed by super long chunky paragraphs. So scene breaks can also help with the flow of reading so that a reader is not overwhelmed by this long chunks of paragraphs and be able to just read through it better, and it also helps to just make everything look neater as well within your manuscript. The next key point is scene breaks can be used cleverly for flash forward, flashback, or dream sequence scenes. So you can use scene breaks also for those types of scenes. It's a really good way to transition to a scene in the future or a scene from the past or a scene of a character dreaming about something. And the last key point is to use a blank space or 3 or 4 asterisks or pound signs centered on the pages of your manuscript to separate paragraphs and indicate scene breaks to your readers. So there are different ways that you can indicate scene breaks. You can use just a simple blank space between paragraphs. You can use asterisks, or you can use like pound signs in your manuscript. And then once you actually publish your book, you can use like different images of things that revolve around your story or that's mentioned within your story as the actual scene break that indicates the separation of paragraphs in your book. That's pretty much what I did in my books for The Pack of Freedom and for Eva's Promise as well. For Eva's Promise, I used a rose image to separate paragraphs in between, and for The Pack of Freedom, I just used a stem of cotton for that one. So you can use actual images in the actual interior design of your book for scene breaks, but if it's just the manuscript, then you can just use a blank space or asterisk or pound signs. Below here I just have a scene from my debut novel, Eva's Promise, of a writing example, and in this particular scene that includes a scene break, I transition from a women's room or restroom to the waiting room in a local hospital. I'm just going to read through it to just show the transition between these two different locations. Eva hurried into a stall and hovered over a toilet. For a moment she fought the violent jerks and tried to keep from puking, but the reverse motion made her sicker. Soon she had coughed up the morning breakfast she'd eaten. She stayed in the stall for a good 10 minutes, struggling to gather herself together. "Mrs. Lucas! Mrs. Lucas, hurry quick!" Nurse Daphne called into the restroom. Tremors shook Eva's body. She exited and wiped her mouth with a wad of toilet paper. Eva frowned at the elated face of the brunette nurse in purple scrubs, poking her head from behind the entrance swing door. "What is it?" Daphne grinned. "It's your husband. He's awake." Eva widened her eyes. "He is?" She thought she would fake. Was it a joke, or was the nurse telling the truth? She wasn't in the mood for anyone playing games with her emotions. Dr. Brown listened if Andre's heart was still beating, and out of nowhere he moaned and opened his eyes. "It's a miracle," Daphne said, smiling. Eva blinked and felt breathless. "Oh my goodness." She placed her hand over her mouth and broke down as what Pastor Tyson said in the sanctuary echoed through her mind. "The Lord has the last say. The Lord has the last say." She couldn't contain the joy bubbling up inside her, much less stand straight. Her legs were flimsy as cooked spaghetti, leaning against the opening of the stall. Daphne ran over and squeezed Eva in a hug. "I knew it. Your husband's still alive. He's alive." Eva stared in disbelief. "Are you serious? I can't believe it." "Come on, you can wait for the results. Nurse Gia will call you when he's ready." Daphne looped an arm around Eva and walked her out of the restroom. And here in the highlight I have the scene break, and we're going into the waiting room now. "Mrs. Lucas?" Peter strode into the waiting room with the paperwork. "Yes?" Eva rose from her seat with her sleeping son in her arms. Since her husband awoke from his coma, what would the coordinator say now? Peter tilted his head and floated in his mouth. I heard about your husband's recovered consciousness, and in the conference room I got the impression you didn't want to donate Andre's organs." "No, I didn't," Eva confessed. "I'm sorry." The coordinator held the organ donation packet horizontally in his hands and tore it in half, and the halves into 2 more halves. "I've talked with Dr. Brown about the dead donor policy of my organ procurement organization. It forbids our transplant team to remove organs from non-deceased patients. Therefore, your husband's organ donation has been canceled, Mrs. Lucas." "Thank you," Eva said humbly. "But if things ever change again, I'll make sure Andre helps save others' lives." "Have a nice day, Mrs. Lucas," Peter said. Eva offered a smile. "You too." The family coordinator left the waiting room. Eva filled her chair and contemplated the patients Andre would have saved, whose lives were still on the line. As much as she was happy her husband had a second chance at life, she prayed God would make another way to spare those people on the waiting list too. "Mrs. Lucas, you can come in now," Nurse Gia said, catching her attention. So that's the end of this writing example passage. As you can see, I have 4 asterisks here to indicate the scene break between the restroom scene here and the waiting room scene in the hospital. So that's all that I have for this tutorial. I hope it was helpful and inspiring, and thank you for watching.